this is Kimberlea, and Yoga Snack is our bite-sized podcast where Robbie and I serve up nourishing discussions on yoga, astrology, nourishment, and mindset.
We mix wisdom with personal experiences to serve up quick, insightful conversations that nourish your practice and add flavor to your daily life.
Ready for a quick bite of wisdom? Let's dig in.
Hi, welcome to Yoga Snack.
Welcome back, you guys.
Yeah.
We are going to finish up, continue on the journey of the Niyamas. And what are we on to today, Robbie?
Tapas.
Tapas.
Yeah.
Most people know this is like, anytime I say tapas, it's like a delicious small bite.
Yeah, like olives and little morsels to pick.
Like appetizers. And I actually, funny story, I didn't know that tapas was small bites ever until like years after teaching yoga. And I remember bringing up tapas as a topic in a class I was teaching, and everybody's like, we're going to talk about small bites. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, because I had zero reference that it had anything to do with food. So it's kind of cute that here we are, Yoga Snack, small bites. It's very much about tapas, and it's not about small bites though. Tapas literally translates to heat in Sanskrit. And again, for those of you maybe that you haven't joined us throughout, the niyamas have to do with the 8 limbs of yoga. It's the second limb of Ashtanga yoga. And yoga is like this beautiful tree where there's lots of branches that connect us into the core of what yoga is offering us. And so the niyamas is very much about taking action a lot of times and how we show up in the world and what we're doing. We did the yamas first. And I'm always like, that's the don't list. And the niyamas is the do list. Like, do this. Don't do those 5 things and do these 5 things. So we did Saucha last, and we talked about cleanliness and purity and how that relates. And then tapas, though, is really about the fire of transformation. It's about being able to show up in a disciplined way and to do things over and over and over again in order to change and to shift and not just change. I think, we can change something, but the actual act of transformation is where we can't go back to what we were before. And heat does that. Like the fire itself does that. With like bread, if you put bread in a toaster and apply heat to it, bread can no longer be bread. It is now toast, and it is forever henceforth toast. And those toast can be made into breadcrumbs or, something else, but it can't go backwards. It can't be what it was before. And this is really the power of discipline, and to apply heat in the proper quantities. Because if we're not careful, we can burn things down. So even our asana practice, right? Our meditation practice, our self-care practices, our ability to tend to and care for our relationships and be intentional and show up again and again and again, even when it's hard. And to know that we're like feeding that in a sustainable way. So I think too, one of the things I talk about when I do trainings is harder to start a fire than it is to maintain a fire. So you go out to the woods, you got to chop down a tree, you got to splinter, you got to saw 2 pieces of wood together, get some kindling, hope that the spark, and think about all the energy that takes.
Right.
And if you can just feed that fire a little bit every day and keep it going, right, that surmountable amount of energy doesn't have to be applied anymore. But it is discipline of feeding that fire every single day. Because if the fire goes out, that it's almost like overwhelming. It's like, oh my God, I know what it takes now to have to start this process again. And that it feels really big sometimes and overwhelming, and it's hard to really set up and start that. So So yeah.
Yeah. I've gone through a bit of a change recently that I've stepped away from teaching asana weekly. So I was talking to you earlier about like, okay, getting up in the morning. This morning would have been a morning when I teach, and not having to develop a class or practice what I've already developed or anything along those lines. And it was like, okay, I gotta get up and I've got to get on my mat. And I think a year ago, that would have been very hard for me to still do. But I think maybe last year there was maybe like one day where I wasn't on my mat. So I really like teaching allowed me to set a nice base of that tapas. Like, and it was, I don't want to say it was like a fear thing, like not being prepared, but kind of, like.
Sure. It can be some intensity, right? It doesn't always have to be fear, but that intensity because you care about something. Fire's intense too. Like there is this like, this thing where it can warm us and heat us, but there is maybe a little bit of like intensity that's implied around that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was, so it was just interesting to observe, like, okay, what's the energy that I'm bringing onto the mat with me? And then like, once I'm there, like, how does it feel differently than when I was teaching? And it does feel like I can sort of soften into the practice a bit because I'm not like bookmarking things for later.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel it when I went to go visit my mom. I was gone for 3 weeks in December, and I didn't have any classes to teach, and I didn't want to teach. I was actually real close to burnout for a lot of different reasons, not necessarily burnt out teaching yoga, but just marketing yoga and all the things of the year just sort of felt like I needed to nourish myself and to wake up every morning and go and practice exclusively for myself, kind of like what you're saying, is an entirely different way. And that bookmarking, at least as a teacher, it's like you hear something, you hear a cue, or there's a movement or a transition, and you're like, oh, I like that, or oh, that's what I'll use, or even a theme for the day or the week. And it's like we are always kind of like reaching for some sort of inspiration, perhaps. And even after all these years of teaching, I still do the same thing. And to have that set down temporarily, there's a liberation to it, but it's also helpful to know that you're going to come back to your mat, whether it's for teaching purposes, right? I mean, I think ultimately we're doing it for ourselves, but as a teacher, we are in that place, hopefully, of being a student first and learning, and then taking what we're learning and integrating it and applying it to the way that we're moving through the world, and the way that we're teaching yoga, too. And so, yeah, it's that ability though to feed something every single day. And this is where we come into that place of self-discipline. And it's tricky because like the physical practice of yoga is so overdone. It's so overdone. And people say yoga and they think that we mean get on your mat and do triangle pose or whatever, the 26 postures of hot yoga, or, like that's the yoga. And the sustainability piece of it is you can do yoga every single day, and it might look different. It might show up, but it's that intentionality and that carving out of the thing that you're going to do over a long period of time. And you're going to come back to it again and again and again. Because my practice has changed significantly over the years, but I will tell you, for 10 years, I needed to show up and do a very physical practice 1 hour a day. And I did it in the mornings. I hated mornings, but that was the only time I could fit it in. And it changed me. Now I get up in the morning willingly to practice yoga because I know that sets my day, but my practice looks very different. Today I did a 1 hour practice with yoga medicine online, and it starts with myofascial release, and it's not like and it's still some vinyasa and some inversion at the end, but it does not look anything like it does. And sometimes it will look like that. Sometimes it will be a 20-minute practice. I think even now, if I go to the weight room, I don't wear headphones. I practice barefoot. I lift barefoot. It's a very present thing that I'm doing, and I'm working with my breath. And so it's sort of formed itself into all these other places in my life that I'm practicing yoga as often as I can because it's a way of being in the world. But we also need formal practices to remind us of that and to study and all of that. And so that ability to feed the fire every day, like sometimes the fire's going pretty well and you just got to throw a little bit in. You're just like, oh man, that little bit of kindling's okay. Another time, oh no, it almost went out. And you're like blowing on it and you're like adding, you're like, oops, shoot, and so it's going to take a little bit more effort. But to actually go out into the forest, cut down a tree, sliver the wood, and like that's a huge amount of energy. Right. And what yoga is saying, little by little, again and again, just do something over and over and over again. And science, modern science is sort of jumping on board and they're like, yeah, this is the way you change your nervous system, is the small things that you do every single day. It's not the one big flash in the pan. It's not going out and building a fire once every 2 weeks that's actually going to change you. It's like tending to that fire every single day. And what does that look like? And how can you do it sustainably? Because we all have really complicated lives right now. And that's sometimes hard because people want this like big, giant, like thing that they can go do once. And then it's going to change their life. And it's like, well, maybe not. There was somebody I follow. I wish I remembered his Instagram name. But he said, it's not intensity that changes you, it's consistency. And I was like, hell yes.
Right.
Hell yes. That's why, I have a series of a playlist on YouTube now, and it's 5 minutes every day for 30 days, 5 minutes. And I think you did the challenge when I put it up last summer. And like there was so little follow through of all 30 days, like like 5 minutes, you guys. Literally 5 minutes. And what's hard is what's easy is to let it get away from you. And I forget stuff. There's things that I want to be able to do every single day. And I'm like, I missed the mark on that. And so it's not complicating our lives. It's asking us to prioritize the way that we want to be in the world and what's going to support that. And when you look at it and you understand it's actually probably more simple than you want it to be, then it's really a discipline of showing up consistently, and having grace for yourself when things hit the fan. But that's what I mean. People are like, oh, I haven't been practicing yoga. And what they mean is they haven't been on their mat. But what if we redefined it a little bit and talked about what yoga actually is and what it's not? Because there's plenty of people that, I'm putting this in quotes, go do yoga, and they're just working out, which is fine. Our bodies need to be tended to, right? But the broader scope of yoga is a lifestyle. Yoga has this undertone of like choosing your life intentionally and showing up and doing your best. And you're still going to flop around and flounder. Like it doesn't act, I think it actually kind of gets harder in some ways. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because it's like, I don't know, there's like that old, I don't know, it's like Maya Angelou, as she said, like, once you know better, do better.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's a little bit like once you see where you can sort of refine and polish up certain areas of your life, you can't unsee that.
Yeah.
So it's like getting up this morning and getting on my mat. It's like I have to at this point. Like it's.
Yeah, it's not negotiable. It's like brushing your teeth. Do you negotiate with yourself to brush your teeth? I do at night, like every night. I'm like, do I really have to do it? But in the morning, it's like, absolutely. And I do at night most time. I'm like 80%.
It's normal. I think
the nighttime brushing the teeth, there's that negotiation still. But in the morning, no. Do you negotiate that you have to pee first thing in the morning? No, you just get up and you go and you do the thing. And and I think that's where the transformation occurs. Like when it becomes the thing you do, or it becomes you, it just becomes a part of the way that you're moving through the world. And I want to get really clear. It's not about necessarily getting on your mat, but getting on my mat is what changed me.
Yeah.
Right? For other people, it might be waking up and meditating first thing. And in fact, that's something I started doing this new year. Is the first thing I'm doing in the morning is actually meditating. I don't get out of bed, but I have been doing a 12-minute meditation first thing in the morning when I wake up. It's a gratitude meditation, and that's what I want now. And so then I do that, and then I wake up and I come into my routine, and my routine is I get up, I make my bed, I brush my teeth, and I get on my mat. And then I go take my greens, take my, supplements, and I head out for the day. And that's what works right now. That's my yoga right now, like all of that. And some of that's going to reconfigure, right? There's going to be this reconfiguration of it all, but the intent is still there. I'm going to show up intentionally in my life, reverently, as often as I can. First thing in the morning, I'm going to look at my life as a gift, and I'm going to tend to that gift the best that I can. And that's a shift, right? Because you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh, fuck, right? Like that's a different vibe.
Yeah.
It just is.
Mm-hmm.
And to wake up and self-care being the first thing that you do, or meditation as, or whatever, even making my bed, I'm like, something got done. Right away, I completed a task.
Sometimes that's what it is, like getting the ball rolling.
Yeah, exactly. But then we also, right, have to get really careful, because that fire, we can get burnt out, and then we're not tending to the fire. And then the fire becomes all consuming. And then we overvalue, like we start to like judge not only ourselves, but other people around, like, oh, well, they're not disciplined because I do yoga every morning and I'm all hoity-toity, snooty-palooty around my rituals, and your rituals aren't as good as my rituals, or, whatever. And so we have to be really careful.
Yeah, I can feel it. I feel that creep in with my partner all the time. Like,
sure.
I'm like, I've already done my practice.
Yeah.
I'm like starting my day, and I'm like,
what have you done?
What are you about to do? You're gonna not get on your mat, huh?
Right. Yeah. So we have to keep ourselves in check too, because that fire is insidious sometimes too, and it burns things down, and it's not generative. Fire is meant to cook us, and that the book that we've alluded to, I think, on all the other ones too, Deborah Adele, the Yamas and Niyamas. There's this quote in it that I love, and she says that you have to learn to stay in the fire long enough to let it bless you. Because sometimes we like step in the fire, we're like, oh, no, thank you. Right? And then other times we stay too long and it burns us, right? It harms us actually. And again, so we're always going to come back to discernment, right? Like that's what yoga is inviting us to do. And even that, like remembering and forgetting pulsation, it's like there's all these things. Like, I really want to learn Spanish. Well, guess what, Kim? The only way you're going to fucking learn Spanish is to do it every day. Even, and I literally just think about it once every 2 weeks about the fact that I want to learn Spanish. That's not going to get me anywhere.
I know. You should have seen before they killed him off. My Duolingo Al, he was hurting. He was in bad shape.
Oh, no.
He was like bruised eye.
You skipped it, Robbie. You harmed someone without your tapas. Right. Yeah. And I think there, though, is this intentionality underneath it. It's not just the sake of doing something over and over again, that there is a richness and a depth and a meaning and an intentionality that comes along with it. And we may not even know what that is right at first. And it probably will change over time. And so I think that that's important too, because tapas means heat. Heat changes us. And I'm probably, well, I'm going to say it. I'm not a fan of hot yoga because I think it's external tapas. And like when we get into the transformative offerings of of deep, heavy, sacred geometry and alignment in the body and deep work, and when you're the one creating the heat inside of your body and you learn to stay with that intensity, that's where the juice is. Yeah. That's where the nectar is. That's that place where we learn to stay. And maybe I had this revelation. One time I was in California with one of my daughters for a dance competition, and the studio that was nearest to me, it was a hot studio, and the only times I could go, and of course I'm trying to fit this in, and around a complicated schedule. And I went to some hot classes, and the teacher was very good. I really enjoyed him, and but I was pouring sweat the whole time, and I'm like, I guess maybe what they're trying to do is to teach people how to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And this is a way in, I guess, And so I understand. And my teacher, Jeannie Manchester, she would say, this yoga is about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like you need to learn how to be uncomfortable. You just do. And because life's uncomfortable, we're not here to be soothed. We're not here to be rocked all the time and to be told how amazing and beautiful and wonderful we are, because we are that. And life is also unkind, uncomfortable, unfair, really hard. And there's a resiliency that you have to show up in order to stay engaged and to stay in the game.
Yeah.
And that's hard to hear.
Right.
It's hard to hear.
Yeah.
And self-care is hijacked. That whole term self-care has gotten hijacked as well, because it's like, being overly soft with ourselves. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't rest. It doesn't mean you shouldn't take breaks, right? And that's that discernment piece of it. Because there are times when the yoga is staying in bed longer. And for me right now, sometimes those mornings, that's what I choose. I'm like, my yoga is to stay in bed longer and to do a shorter practice.
Yeah.
But that was not true for Kim 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. That choice did not mean what it means now.
Right.
Because I've transformed. I've changed. Yoga's changed me.
Yeah. And it goes back to that, like, it doesn't happen overnight.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a long time of repatterning to change the patterns that, I was
right
in my late 20s before I even attempted yoga.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like all those patterns from 20 something years of emotional and physical
Mm-hmm.
abuse, just like being undealt with.
Mm-hmm.
And is that a word, undealt with?
Undealt with. Sure,
we'll
it is now.
We'll go with it.
It is now. Put it in the dictionary.
Without it being dealt with, and it's like now finally there's an outlet,
mm-hmm.
And it takes some time. You're not going to just be like, okay, here I've been doing yoga for 30 days. I'm supposed to be a good person.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for one, you're probably already a good person. Two, it takes longer than 30 days.
But we put so many things over the top of it that the taking off of that, light and goodness and truth, sometimes it's really heavy, and there's these layers that we have to pull away at to get back to ourselves.
Yeah, right.
I even think about it, like we could probably go down the route of like baking bread. Like I am a quick bread girl. I don't have the pay, like literally, like I don't. And yesterday, actually, I had lunch with a really good friend of mine, and she's on the sourdough journey,
Okay.
and she's like, she was so proud of the bread that she had made. She's like, I'm so proud that she showed me pictures of her bread and the crumb, and I was like, oh, it's so beautiful. And I was like, what was different this time? What'd you do differently? She's like, patience. And we've got some side noises here. Sorry about that, you guys. But that was literally her answer, was patience.
Yeah.
She's like, I fed it consistently and I waited. And I was like, yoga.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I fed the things that I needed to feed regularly, consistently, in the right quantity at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I waited and I did it again. And then I did it again. And then when I went to do the thing, there was this beautiful, expression that occurred. And it wasn't, she didn't change the ingredients. She didn't, like literally it just didn't. And so I loved that as a metaphor too. And I was just like, patience, huh?
Right. Yeah. I spent months and months trying to perfect, not that I ever perfected, but like,
well, there's rigor to it, right?
Yeah. And it was like, why isn't this working? And then I went through teacher training and started at it again and was like, for some reason this is working now. And I think it was just like that, like softening into and like not being so like, all right, it has to be done at this amount of time. The recipe said 4 hours. Why isn't it done yet?
Yeah.
And it's like,
yeah. And that discernment, right? You're able to dial in and read the situation because you're more clear. And, going back to teacher training, like teacher training works. It is a self-development tool. Now, you don't have to be a teacher, right, of yoga, but that is a rigor. And a lot of times, like the program I used to do was 12 weeks long, 11, 12 weeks long. We met regularly 3 times a week, 4 times a week, some weeks. And that rigor and that studentship, especially for the people who are fully engaged in it, it shifts you.
Yeah.
You cannot not get changed through that process. And it's normally a catalyst for larger changes. We used to joke around, we're like, okay, during these 12 weeks, please don't quit your job or leave your partner. Like, let's just sit on all of the, because that, like, it is a catalyst a lot of times, especially if you're in a program with some richness to it. And I think also being witnessed with other people, witnessing you witnessing their changes, like that also adds a whole other layer of transformation. But that's tapas. When you step into an area of study and you commit yourself to it, and I don't care if it's Spanish or yoga teacher training or, X, Y, or Z, but when you fully step into something and you commit to that, that's tapas. Yeah. And there's no other way than to step on the other side of it without being transformed in some way. Now, if you don't keep feeding the fire, right? If I went and did like a 12-week immersion of Spanish somewhere and I'm like coming back and I'm like, I am so much hola, ¿cómo está? And I have that like rigor for like 12 weeks, but then I come back into my life and I don't have any kind of plan, or I have no sort of application of how I'm going to use Spanish, and it just sort of slips off the radar. Do you really think that shift is something that's going to carry over with me into the way that I, no. And yoga it's broader than the asana. We use asana as a textbook to study ourselves, right? That the poses and all of that, and we have to include the body. But there are people who are paralyzed who still do yoga, and their quality of life is just as rich, right? Being able to move energy through the body. And so I come back to it. It's like, yeah, we need the asana at some level, but it's not about the asana. And until you start to study and dive a little deeper, we all start there. I started with the physical practice. I'm not ever going to say I didn't, but then there's this spark. Something changes us. And sometimes it's really scary and our life has to blow up in order for us to step into our lives fully. And that's a little scary. I would have, when I had my studio, and I would have people coming regularly for like 4 months was this like magic drop off point. You would see people like step in and they were like, wow, something is happening. I feel so much better. Things are changing. And then about 4 months in, they fall off the radar. And that's because there's this shift in their life that you either have to look at it or you're going to have to choose what you've always chose.
There's a 4-month fork on the road, and you say, this is nice, I'm going to keep doing this, or
Yep.
I don't want to lose.
Right.
this
Or
other-
or your life begins to blow up and it's like, actually, I think I'll choose the life I had, even though I was complaining about it. I think I'll just choose that again.
Scrambling for that steady footing, even if it's maybe to the detriment of best interest.
Yeah. And I was just like, if you would have just kept practicing, but not everybody's ready for that. Yoga's not, I don't mean this like as an exclusive way, but yoga isn't for everyone, right?
No, not everything.
Not everybody wants that shift. Not everybody wants to accept the invitation. And that's why I'm always like, yoga is an invitation. It's not an obligation. I think there's an open invitation. It's like here, and it's like my junk mail. Some people just toss it in the recycle and don't open the invitation. And some people, left it in their mail or got delivered to the wrong mailbox maybe, or, but you open it up or you see the invitation, you mark it on your calendar and you never go. Or it's like you start to actually truly accept the invitation. And there's so much to this path when it's something that you've actually accepted and the invitation towards. But it's not for everybody. And that's okay. And I don't mean it as an exclusive, like you can't come. Like, what is it? Do you remember Ratatouille? Did you ever see the movie Ratatouille?
Mm-hmm.
I remember the chef, the 5-star, he's the ghost though, because he died.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So, he says, and I want to get it right. He says, he's talking about cooking. Cooking is isn't for everyone, but anyone can do it, or something like that. It was like this little caveat.
Everyone can cook, or something like that. Yeah,
but not anyone, like or something like that. Oh, I gotta look it up now. But that's how I want to frame it. Is like it's for not everyone. Cooking is. Oh gosh, now it's just a big jumble. It'll come back in a way that makes sense. But it was a play on words of everyone and anyone. And, maybe it's anyone can cook, but not everyone can. And anyone can do yoga, but not everyone will.
Yeah.
And it's open in a way that it's such a broad way of practicing. But in the popular culture, we've reduced it down, and I think we've made it feel really exclusive in some ways, and in an unkind and an inauthentic way. And that's why like teaching chair yoga is really enriching for me, because I'm just like, we're doing good yoga there. Like we're doing rigorous yoga, and these women, and I have one man that comes over and over again, Ross. We're repeating this. And we're in community and we're doing it twice a week and we're coming regularly, and there's that studentship, and everybody there is probably in their 70s, even 80s, and that rigor of like showing up again. They understand the importance of that, and that's tapas, right? That's tapas. And I'm working with people in chairs, who have limited mobility, who has had a lot of life in their bodies that they've lived, and they're still showing up, and they're working and they're breathing. And we're having these really beautiful, rich discussions about energy and prana and balance and what it looks like, not just in a physical way, but in a metaphorical way, and how to be better human beings, even at that stage in their lives, and how we want to show up in the world and support each other.
Yeah, it's such a rich that group is such a rich group because like I don't know, most yoga classes you walk into, everybody's sitting there on their mat and they're being very quiet and like sitting up straight. And you walk into that class and everyone's talking with each other and they're like asking them about their lives. And like, that's what community I think is like an, an actual care and like, how is your life going? Not just like we show up at this class and we set up next to each other, but we don't ever get past hi.
Right. And the trendy yoga clothing isn't there. It's not a necessity. And there's all of these side conversations and care. And now they are in a different stage of their life. A lot of times they're normally retired and, and maybe there's a little bit more space for that, but the rigor is still there. Like they're still showing up.
Yeah.
And doing it regularly because they see and they feel the benefit of it. And then even when there's some sort of hardship or difficulty, they're still showing up, which is such a privilege for me to witness. And they're sharing that vulnerability and they're just received with like support and deep connection and community. And so the tapas, even though maybe on the outside, like tapas at 20 is still really important, but it probably looks different than tapas at 70. But it's still the same. Yeah. It's still fire. You're still feeding the fire. And whether you're feeding the fire of, needing to clarify your body because you put a lot of toxins. I put a lot of toxins in my body when I was in my 20s. I also had children and I, like all sorts of, stuff that I had to get straight. I had to get right in my life. And yoga was that invitation that once I finally accepted it and it hit me, it's like there was no going back. And that's what tapas does. It's like the fire toasted the bread. I'm toast. I'm toast. Hopefully with a delicious like balsamic glaze and avocado on it or something, I'm going to top the toast.
Just dope.
But I'm not bread anymore. I can't go back. There's no alternative. And I used to smoke cigarettes and I started when I was like 17 and I smoked until I got pregnant at 22. And, and then I stopped smoking because I was pregnant. And then I like dabbled again when I was like 25 and then I got pregnant again. And, and I stopped smoking and I stopped smoking because it was in care for the life that I was holding inside of me. It wasn't necessarily for myself. And what's interesting now, I'm on the other side of it for so long, I couldn't even imagine. It's like, it's repulsive to me to even consider or think about it or be around it even. And it's so funny because it was such a big part of my identity when I was younger that I'm like, who was that person? And we start living into these different parts of ourselves and we can't go back to what we were before, and even in my own body, like diet wise and stuff, like the things that I used to eat, and I'm an emotional eater. And so there's, I definitely know that can still live inside of me, but it doesn't express itself in any way like it used to, and I can watch when things are happening where I'm just like, oh, that's a sign that something's out of balance. Like what's actually going on, Kim? And that self-inquiry that it starts to give us, and hopefully that richness of our life, that it gives us our life in a different way. But that's what tapas is. And delicious small bites.
And delicious small bites as well.
Right.
I remember the first time I went to a tapas restaurant, I was like, what is this now? It's just small stuff. Why? I just didn't understand. I was like from the Midwest. I'm interested
that's
in
how I was
meat and
too.
brie, a big plate. And I was like, what even is this? And now it's like, I prefer that, I think.
I know. If I teach a class on tapas, that's the first thing people say. They're like, delicious small bites. And I'm like, no, we're going to burn, baby, burn. And there is like that is one of the things that for some people, like through asana, you learn how to sit with hard, hot shit. Like you sit in Utkatasana and you learn to stay with the intensity. And hopefully you're also discerning like what is Iyengar, because Iyengar would say right pain, wrong pain. I kind of like pain versus intensity. But he would say there's right pain and there's wrong pain. Right pain is a catalyst and a spark for transformation, and it burns away things that are inhibiting us from growing. Wrong pain is destructive. Wrong pain is burning us down. It's taking us to the charnel grounds, and we're getting demolished in a way that it's not affirming us. It's not feeding our fire. It's and so that's also the physical practice of yoga is also gradual, because if you step into a class and you're not willing to negotiate with yourself, you're going to maybe wake up the next morning feeling demolished. Right. And then you're not going to want to go back. That's what I used to do with like working out. I would be like all in, and I remember I like started running again one time years ago. I don't run now unless something's chasing me. But after I ran, then I decided to do like lunges all around like my neighborhood. I was doing like step lunges and I'm like, why would you just introduced this new activity and then you like leveled it up, and the next day I couldn't even freaking walk.
Yeah. I just listened to a whole podcast about that whole like mentality around working out, and now we think that like everything we've been told is that this is great. You're doing great. You're sweating it out. But it's the damage it's doing to your nervous system is
totally.
It's the unseen thing that you're
totally.
And then like running, for instance, you get on the treadmill and you're running away and you're like, I'm doing so much good work. I'm sweating. I'm feeling like I'm really exerting myself. And then, consciously or unconsciously, you go home and you eat probably extra because like, I did it. I got to refill.
Oh, then, I feel that hard.
Yeah. And then you're just reversing immediately everything that was just happening because of that nervous system response.
Yeah.
And that's a tough thing to decide, like, especially if you're first starting out, like with yoga, especially.
Yeah, because we want it to be transformative right away. We're very much, and I know this is so overused, but we're in an instant gratification society. But it's true.
Yeah.
Just because it's said often doesn't make it not true. It's true. If I say to somebody, do this for 3 years every day, and you're going to feel better eventually, that's almost suffocating and hard for people to hear. And I think that there are times when we need immediate action, like there's like if you have a flesh wound and it's just a flesh wound, we put a Band-Aid on it, that's fine. And but there's times when we need intervention, like massive intervention around things. So if somebody's having maybe like a severe depressive episode in their lives, for me to walk in and just be like, hey, just, do a little bit of asana and some meditation every day. And, but they actually need intervention in a really crisis acute way. I want to be really clear and kind about that, like that. I'm not just saying like yoga fixes everything, because it doesn't, but it does allow for a framework to help you support yourself and potentially give you the discernment to know when you need extra help or intervention, because the things that you're always doing that typically support you aren't working. Right. And so I think that that's also that invitation piece of it. It's not to say that like yoga fixes everything. So I want to be really clear about that. But it sure does help. Yeah. I think that's even on my website. I'm like, yoga doesn't fix a goddamn thing, but it sure does help. It sure does help.
Yeah.
And to give ourselves the care and attention that we, really deserve to live a full, robust human life, which includes, all of the flavors, not just the sweet and the, um, yoga is just, it's a deep structure for that. It offers that. And I think there's other things that can support people for it as well.
Mhm.
But it's like learning to show up for yourself, like really showing up for yourself in ways that honor you, because the things that I do ultimately are what I've investigated for myself. And I can make suggestions, I can help you understand, like from my experience. I've had people ask me about nutrition. I'm like, that's not my lane of expertise.
Mhm.
I can tell you what I do, but I'm not sure if that's good. I don't know if that works for you. You might need more protein than me. I'm, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, but also, I want to, circle back to kind of what you said too about working out and that intensity of working out. What I observe in one of the studios I work at, they have a hot studio, and there's classes where they're doing cardio and weights, and and it's like 102 degrees and like 60% humidity. And um, years ago, when I very first started teaching yoga at another studio, she was doing a little bit of hot stuff, but she's like, she stopped offering it because she was like, the owner, she's like, one, it's not environmentally responsible, to utilize, natural resources when we don't need to.
Mhm.
And I thought that was really interesting, right? I was like, oh, well, that's that. And she's like, most everybody inside of their nervous system is already in crisis. Like we're watching, where people are walking in to class and their nervous system is already in crisis. And then we're going to add an external um, element to it. And cortisol is one of the stress hormones that it's not bad. Like cortisol is appropriate. We actually need cortisol in the mornings to wake up properly. We need it to peak and to flow in different ranges. And um, but what happens is a lot of people's cortisol is already just jumping up, and especially in the evenings, or it's already out of whack. And for us to intentionally put ourselves in another crisis type situation that our nervous system is just chronically trying to cool us down, it's like adding um, gasoline to the fire.
Yeah.
It's not it's not adding a little bit of kindling. It's like adding gasoline, and then it doesn't become a solution. It actually becomes a place where it's really um, adding to behaviors or to the chemical composition of ourselves. And that really made a lot of sense to me. Our bodies aren't designed to work really, really hard in high heat. We can do cold extreme stuff. That's more, you know, but our ancestors, if you think about it, if it was really, really hot and really, really humid, they waited till the evening to do hard work,
Yeah.
or they protected themselves from the heat with clothing. And so if we go back and look at that, um, maybe we start to have to look carefully, like, are we just there to punish ourselves?
Right.
And that's not tapas. Tapas is not about punishing ourselves. It is about self-discipline and discernment and learning to feed and fuel ourselves and practices that actually are sustaining us and upholding us. And I'm never going to tell somebody to, if somebody is there may be certain dispositions that really hot yoga and stuff like that's appropriate for. So I'm not going to ever discourage people from doing things they love, because movement in general is important. But it might be interesting to look at,
Yeah.
right? What are our motivations?
Yeah. Because even like, I don't know, I'm not like obviously I'm not decades into my yoga practice like you are, but like I've started to notice a little bit sometimes, like the irritation that creeps up when I do go over that line of like, okay, this was too much for where I'm at
Mm-hmm.
today. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's like a real like, it's like, how do I come off my mat feeling more like a dick and then when I got on it, like, and I think it's maybe not, just that like overabundance.
Yeah. And yoga is a confrontation with ourselves, right? We should be looking at the places in our life where we are over asking and under asking.
Yeah.
Right. And that'll show up. And our ability to like pay attention and to look at that is really important information.
Yeah.
Instead of just doing it blindly. Right. And that it doesn't mean we're going to get on our mat and hit the mark every time. We're going to be confronted most likely every time with like, was that enough? Not too much? Are you doing it just, did you check out? Oh, I did my whole practice and I don't have any idea what just happened. Like that still happens to me sometimes after all these years. But it's our ability to look at it and to dial it and to use that and to start to create some wisdom around the knowledge that we're collecting about ourselves.
Yeah.
And that wisdom, it just takes time. It just takes time.
Yeah.
And to go, bury our head and just follow directions too isn't what yoga's inviting us to. It's sovereignty. Like you get sovereignty over your experience. And that's also a really big responsibility because we'd rather blame other people.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a lot easier that way. It sure is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like, that sovereignty, like even small stuff, like be out on a trail and like stop to look at a vista. And it's like before yoga, like there might be like this amazing, like carved out viewing spot 3 steps to the left. But before yoga, I wouldn't give that. Like I would like, no, this is where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
This is the spot that I've chosen. And it's like now I can actually like view my surroundings a bit more and say, oh, well, maybe this would work out a little better. Maybe this would be a better view. So I think it's just that like coming into connection with that part, like being able to decide, what is going to benefit you in each moment. And that is always changing. That's one of the ones that we talked about. Like the truth is always changing.
Everything. Yeah. If we're paying attention.
Yeah.
Right. Because yoga is really a method of learning to pay attention to our patterns, to our surroundings, to what's inside, to what's outside. And what's cool though, is if you're paying attention, you're probably in a state of awe a little bit more often too. You're not just in a state of confrontation.
Right.
I mean, it takes that too. You're like, what am I putting in my body now? Like once you start to read the labels, you're like, shit, and you have to make a decision that before you just unconsciously did.
Yeah,
so
sometimes it sucks.
Yeah, it's hard. Yoga's a confrontation.
I did an elimination diet after the first of the year, and I ended up getting sick at the end. And I literally was like, I'm still sick. Why can't I just eat pizza? Like, like this is bullshit. Why can't I just do what I want to do if I'm still going to get sick anyway?
Right.
But,
Yeah.
It was just me. I was being a baby in the moment.
Yeah, well, we do that. Like that is a flavor of being human, is we get discouraged.
Yeah.
And we skip a day. And we, and I think that's the thing. Maybe you told me this. You said something about missing one day is just missing, but missing 2 days or 3 days becomes a pattern, a new habit or a new pattern or something. Maybe you didn't, but somebody told me that.
I'd like to take claim for that. That sounds
good. Okay, Robbie said, even though he doesn't remember. Yoga is a practice of remembrance. I'm helping you remember. That's what teachers are for. I'm helping you remember how brilliant you are. So it's like giving ourselves grace still too, to fluctuate and move, because the target's moving all the time. Balance isn't a fixed target with a fixed formula, with a fixed calorie count, with a fixed movement count, with a fixed relationship count, with a fixed, it's a constantly moving target. And that ability to know that, then we might need right at first this set target to aim for, But once we cross a certain threshold and we've started to gain knowledge and integrate it into wisdom, we understand that that target is actually moving all the time. But we probably needed a fixed target to begin with, right? And that's fair, and that's important, and that's development. But then once you really get accurate at hitting that mark, you have to realize too, now the next level is to maintain that in a constantly shifting and moving world. So that's why we need practices. We need things to shore us back up again and again and again and again and again, and to fortify us. And when we have that fortification, though, we have to step into the world fortified and understand that now our work will change and our tapas will change right along with it, and that we have to be willing to shift and change and let life continue to change us. That's the point of life, is to change us. You're not going to get a perfect formula of, you're not going to take the same supplements, the same movement regimen, the same protocol for the rest of your life. You'll do it for probably a really good segment, maybe, if it's serving you, but if you better be paying attention, because there's going to be a point when it's not serving you anymore. Right. And then if you just keep doing that, then you're feeding the wrong things now, and they're no longer affirming you. They're actually degrading you and maybe not making you feel good.
Yeah.
So, yep. All right. Well, that was a long one. Tapas, this one was always my favorite. Whenever we would do teacher training, I'm like, tapas, because I'm a fire sign,
Right. It's a natural compatibility there.
Right. Remember Beavis and Butthead? Fire, fire, fire. Okay, and with that, and scene. Oh, my stars. Okay. Ooh. Well, there we have it, tapas, and we will next time we're on, we will talk about self-study.
Yeah.
That's another. Where are your blind spots?
Right.
Anyway, so, all right. Well, thank you guys for listening. Would love to have your support by liking, sharing, commenting. Your comments actually mean a lot. I have a retreat to Greece coming up in the fall that's going to be really, really beautiful. I've got a lot of stuff coming out on my YouTube channel. I'm shifting a lot of my paid content over to free content on YouTube. So I hope you check out my YouTube channel and come with me to Greece. And then I've got an embodied anatomy course coming up in this spring. So stay connected with me. And most importantly, the things you can do for free are just like this. You can comment, you can share, and that actually means the world to us. So thank you guys so much, and see you next time.